The sound of rain against my apartment window had become my meditation. For the past 12 years, it had been the only constant in my life, a steady rhythm that asked nothing of me, judged nothing about me, expected nothing from me. I sat at my small desk in the corner of my one-bedroom apartment in East Vancouver, the glow of my laptop screen reflecting off my reading glasses. Friday afternoon meant I had 3 tax returns to finish before the weekend. Mrs. Chen from the laundromat downstairs, the Patels who ran the convenience store, young Marcus, the Uber driver who was putting himself through UBC, small accounts, simple work, honest work. My hands moved across the keyboard with the same precision they'd once used to manage billion-dollar portfolios. Muscle memory doesn't forget, even when everything else does. The apartment was quiet except for the rain and the occasional creak of the old radiator. No television, no music. I'd learned to appreciate silence over the years. It was honest, at least. It didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. My phone buzzed on the desk. An unknown Toronto number. I almost didn't answer. I got enough spam calls, but something made me reach for it. "Is this Thomas Brennan?" A woman's voice. Professional. Clipped. Speaking. "Mr. Brennan, this is Patricia Holbrook from Ashford and Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of Margaret Brennan." My hand stopped moving on the keyboard. Margaret. I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. Hadn't allowed myself to think it. "I see," I managed. "I'm sorry to inform you that Mrs. Brennan passed away on Tuesday. The funeral is tomorrow at 2 o'clock at Mount Pleasant Cemetery in Toronto. Following the service, there will be a reading of the will at our offices at 4. Your presence is requested." The words seemed to come from very far away. Margaret was dead. The woman I'd loved more than my own life. The woman I'd destroyed my career for. The woman who'd never spoken to me again. "Mr. Brennan, are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here. Will you be able to attend?" Every instinct told me to decline. What business did I have at Margaret's funeral? I was the disgraced ex-husband, the criminal who'd stolen from his own company. I'd seen the articles at the time, CFO Thomas Brennan charged with embezzlement. They'd used my worst photo, the one where I looked guilty, even though I wasn't. But something in me, some stubborn remnant of who I'd once been, whispered that I should go, that I owed Margaret that much, at least. "I'll be there," I heard myself say. After I hung up, I sat very still, watching the rain run down the window in irregular streams. Toronto. I hadn't been back to Toronto in 12 years. Hadn't seen Victoria, my daughter, in almost as long. The last time had been in a courtroom, her face white with shame as the judge read my sentence. She'd been 28 then, just starting to make a name for herself in the tech world. Now she'd be 40. A stranger. I closed my laptop and walked to the small closet where I kept my one good suit. Navy blue, slightly outdated but well-maintained. I'd worn it to job interviews that never led anywhere, to meetings with probation officers, to the small accounting firm where I'd eventually found work doing taxes for people who paid in cash and didn't ask questions about my past. I held up the suit, checking for moths or stains. It would do. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the last time I'd seen Margaret. It had been in her hospital room, 3 months after my sentencing. She'd been recovering from the stress-induced heart attack that had nearly killed her. Victoria had been there too, standing guard like a sentinel. "You need to leave," Victoria had said, her voice cold. "You've done enough damage." Margaret had turned her face away. Wouldn't look at me. That silence had hurt more than any words could have. I'd left. I'd taken a bus to Vancouver, as far from Toronto as I could get while staying in Canada. I'd started over with nothing, no reputation, no connections, no references. Just a 60-year-old man with a criminal record trying to remember how to be human again. The next morning, I caught the early flight to Toronto. 6 hours of watching clouds and trying not to think. The woman next to me tried to make small talk, something about visiting grandchildren, but I must have given off an aura of unavailability because she eventually stopped trying. Toronto looked different, bigger, shinier, more towers crowding the skyline. The cab driver who picked me up at Pearson chatted about the Raptors and the housing market. I nodded in the right places but wasn't really listening. I'd booked a room at a small hotel near the cemetery. Nothing fancy. Just a place to change clothes and collect myself before the funeral. At 1:30, I put on my navy suit, knotted my tie with hands that only shook slightly, and took another cab to Mount Pleasant Cemetery. The rain had followed me from Vancouver, a fine mist that made everything look gray and indistinct. There were more cars than I'd expected. Margaret had built Brennan Technologies from a small software startup into one of Canada's most successful tech firms. Of course people would come. Board members, employees, business partners, politicians, probably. I stayed at the back, behind a large oak tree, watching from a distance. I could see the crowd gathered under a green canopy. Victoria stood at the front, her hair shorter than I remembered, wearing a black dress and heels that made her look every inch the CEO she'd become. She was flanked by two men in expensive suits, probably executives from the company. The service was brief. A minister said words about legacy and contribution. Someone from the company spoke about Margaret's vision and leadership. Victoria stood perfectly still through all of it, her face composed, professional. My daughter had learned to wear masks well. I didn't approach, didn't let myself be seen. When the service ended and people began filing back to their cars, I walked in the opposite direction, hands in my pockets, collar turned up against the mist. The law offices of Ashford and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower in the financial district. I arrived early habit from my old life and waited in the lobby, watching well-dressed people hurry past with briefcases and phones pressed to their ears. At 3:50, I took the elevator to the 28th floor. The receptionist looked up when I approached. "Name, please?" "Thomas Brannan." Something flickered in her expression. Recognition? Distaste? She recovered quickly. "Conference room C. Down the hall, 3rd door on the right." The conference room was all glass and chrome, with a view that stretched across downtown Toronto to the lake beyond. A long mahogany table dominated the center, surrounded by leather chairs. Several people were already seated, faces I half recognized from Margaret's business world. They stopped talking when I entered. I took a seat near the door, away from the main group. The chair was uncomfortable, or maybe that was just me. I folded my hands on the table and waited. Victoria arrived exactly at 4 o'clock. She moved with the same purposeful stride Margaret had once had, all business, all control. She walked directly to the head of the table, the seat that had probably been her mother's during board meetings, and sat down without looking around. Then she saw me. For just a moment, her composure cracked, her eyes widened slightly, and color drained from her face. Then the mask came back, harder than before. "What are you doing here?" Her voice carried across the room, sharp enough to cut. "I was invited," I said quietly, "by Mrs. Holbrook. This is family business. You gave up that right when you stole from Mom's company." Several people shifted uncomfortably. I kept my hands steady on the table, my voice calm. "I'm here because I was asked to be here." Victoria's jaw tightened, but before she could respond, the door opened and Patricia Holbrook entered. She was younger than she'd sounded on the phone, maybe mid-40s, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a bun and glasses perched on her nose. She carried a leather portfolio and moved with quiet authority. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Patricia Holbrook, senior partner at Ashford and Associates, and I had the honor of being Mrs. Brennan's estate attorney for the past 15 years. She took a seat at the table, positioning herself between Victoria and me. "I know this is a difficult time, so I'll try to be as efficient as possible." She opened her portfolio and withdrew a thick document bound in dark blue covers. The last will and testament of Margaret Elizabeth Brennan, executed on March 15th, 2024. Victoria sat back in her chair, her expression settling into something between satisfaction and entitlement. I recognized that look. It was the same one she'd worn when she'd won her first case as a corporate lawyer before she'd transitioned into management. Pride mixed with certainty that the world would arrange itself as it should. "Before we begin with the specific bequests," Mrs. Holbrook continued, "I want to read Mrs. Brennan's opening statement." She was quite insistent that this be read aloud, in full, before anything else. She adjusted her glasses and began to read in a clear, professional voice. "To those gathered here, if you are hearing this, then I am gone, and it's time for certain truths to be told. I have lived my life with many regrets, but perhaps none greater than my silence. I built a company, created jobs, made money. These things seemed important at the time. but I also destroyed a good man's life to protect my business, and I let my daughter grow up believing lies because the truth was inconvenient. This will is my attempt, inadequate as it may be, to finally set the record straight. The room had gone very quiet. Victoria's expression had shifted from confident to confused. Mrs. Holbrook continued reading. Thomas Brennan did not embezzle money from Brennan Technologies. I know this because I did. The words hung in the air like smoke. Someone gasped. Victoria's face had gone white. In 2012, Mrs. Holbrook read, our company was on the verge of collapse. We'd overextended on 3 major projects, and our cash flow was critical. I made the decision to redirect funds from our pension accounts temporarily, I told myself, to keep us afloat. It was illegal. It was wrong. And it was all my doing. Thomas discovered what I'd done during a routine audit. He confronted me, threatened to go to the authorities. I begged him not to, not for my sake, but for Victoria's. She'd just joined the company. Any scandal would destroy her career before it even began. Thomas loved his daughter more than anything. So he made me an offer. He would take responsibility for the missing funds. He would claim he'd been embezzling for personal use. In exchange, I would ensure Victoria's future at the company, would groom her to eventually take over, would protect her from the fallout. I agreed. I let him sacrifice himself, his reputation, his entire life. I told myself it was for Victoria, for the company, for the hundreds of employees who depended on us. But really, it was cowardice. Thomas went to prison for crimes I committed. He lost his license, his career, his family, and I said nothing. I built my empire on his silence. Mrs. Holbrook paused, took a sip of water from the glass at her elbow. Victoria sat frozen, her hands gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles had turned white. The other people in the room weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at her. I'm not seeking absolution, Mrs. Holbrook continued reading. There is none for what I've done, but the truth deserves to be known. Thomas Brennan is innocent of the charges brought against him. He is innocent of everything except loving his daughter too much. This will is my confession and my penance. Mrs. Holbrook set down the first page and picked up the next. Now for the specific bequests. To my executive team at Brennan Technologies, David Chen, Susan Martinez, and Robert Liu, I leave a collective bonus of $5 million to be divided equally in recognition of your years of service and loyalty. She continued down the list. Generous gifts to charities, scholarship funds in Margaret's parents' names, the company penthouse to David Chen, who'd apparently been Margaret's second-in-command for years. Then, to my daughter, Victoria Elizabeth Brennan. Victoria straightened slightly, her eyes fixed on Mrs. Holbrook's face. Victoria, you are my greatest achievement and my greatest failure. I gave you every opportunity, every advantage, every chance to succeed. But I also taught you to value success over integrity, appearances over truth. I hope someday you can forgive me for that. I leave you the sum of $25, $1 for each year you've worked at Brennan Technologies in the following message. Money you didn't earn corrupts. Leadership you haven't learned destroys. Start again, as your father once did, and maybe you'll become the person you were meant to be. The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria's face had moved through several shades of white to something approaching gray. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. The remainder of my estate, Mrs. Holbrook read, her voice steady and clear, including all shares of Brennan Technologies, all properties, all investment accounts, all intellectual property rights, and all other assets totaling approximately $185 million. I leave to my former husband, Thomas Brennan, the only truly honest man I ever knew. The room erupted. Not loudly, we were Canadians, after all, and even shock was polite, but erupted nonetheless. Murmurs, exclamations, the scraping of chairs as people turned to look at me. I sat very still, my hands still folded on the table, and felt nothing. Or perhaps I felt too much, and it all canceled out to numbness. There's more, Mrs. Holbrook said, raising her voice slightly. The room quieted again. Mrs. Brennan left specific instructions. Mr. Brennan, this is addressed directly to you. She withdrew a smaller envelope from her portfolio, cream-colored and sealed with wax. She slid it across the table to me. My name was written on the front in Margaret's distinctive handwriting, all precise angles and strong lines. She asked that you read this privately, Mrs. Holbrook said, but the rest pertains to the estate management, which I should explain now. She went on talking about trusts and tax implications and transfer procedures, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was staring at the envelope, at Margaret's handwriting, at the ghost of her hand moving across the paper. When had she written this? How long had she carried these words around, waiting for the right time to speak them? Victoria stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. "This is insane! She wasn't in her right mind. I'll contest this. Mrs. Brennan was thoroughly evaluated by 3 separate physicians in the months before her death, Mrs. Holbrook said calmly. All certified that she was of sound mind and body when she executed this will. She anticipated challenges and took appropriate precautions. The will is ironclad. He stole from us. Victoria's voice had risen, lost its professional polish. She pointed at me, her hand shaking. He admitted it. He went to prison. He took a plea deal to protect you, Mrs. Holbrook said quietly, as your mother just explained. No. Victoria shook her head, her hair coming loose from its neat bun. No, that's not. He wouldn't. She looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time since I'd entered the room. I saw her taking in my outdated suit, my worn shoes, my lined face and gray hair. Saw her trying to reconcile this image with whatever she'd built up in her mind over the years, the criminal father, the betrayer, the selfish man who'd destroyed everything for money. Did you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Did you really take the fall for her? I met her eyes, Margaret's eyes, the same deep brown, and nodded once. Yes. But why? Why would you do that? Because you were my daughter, I said simply. And I loved you. The past tense hung between us like an accusation. Because I had loved her. Past tense. The girl I'd pushed on swings and helped with homework and taught to ride a bike. But that girl was gone. This woman standing before me, trembling with rage and confusion, was a stranger. Victoria's face crumpled. For just a moment, I saw the girl she'd been uncertain, vulnerable, scared. Then she turned and walked out of the conference room, her heels clicking rapidly against the marble floor. The door closed behind her with a soft click. The other executives began gathering their things, murmuring excuses and condolences. Within minutes, the room had emptied, except for Mrs. Holbrook and me. That was more dramatic than most will readings, she said, allowing herself a small smile, though not perhaps more dramatic than Mrs. Brennan intended. She always did have a flair for timing, I said. Mrs. Holbrook began packing up her papers. I'll need you to come by the office next week to sign some documents. There's quite a bit of paperwork involved in transferring this much wealth. I'm sure there is. She paused, looked at me carefully. You don't seem surprised or happy. Most people in your situation would be celebrating. Most people in my situation wouldn't be in this situation, I said. She smiled again, this one warmer. Mrs. Brennan said you'd react this way. She said you'd probably want to give most of it away. She knew me well. She loved you, you know, even after everything. Maybe especially after everything. Mrs. Holbrook snapped her portfolio closed. I'll leave you to read her letter in private. Take your time. The room is reserved for another hour. After she left, I sat alone in the glass and chrome room, watching the sun set over Toronto. The city I'd once called home. The city where I'd had a career, a family, a life. All gone now, scattered like ashes on the wind. I picked up the envelope, felt the weight of it in my hands. Part of me didn't want to open it, didn't want to hear Margaret's voice again, even through written words. Didn't want to feel anything at all. But I broke the seal anyway. The letter was written in the same precise handwriting as the envelope, dated 3 months before her death. Dear Thomas, if you're reading this, then I'm finally free of the cowardice that defined my life. I wish I could say this brings me comfort, but the dead have no comfort, only silence. This letter is not an apology. Words cannot undo what I've done to you. Consider it instead a confession, a testimony, a final accounting. I want you to know that I discovered I was dying 14 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave me 6 months. I've stretched it to 14 through sheer stubbornness and the best medical care money can buy. But even money has limits, and I'm at mine now. When I received the diagnosis, my first thought was relief. Not for myself, dying is terrifying, Thomas, no matter how much you've lived, but relief that finally I would have an excuse to tell the truth. What was the company compared to death? What was reputation compared to meeting whatever comes next with a clean conscience? But even then I hesitated. I told myself I needed to arrange things properly, needed to ensure Victoria would be protected, needed to structure the company's succession. Lies. All of them. The truth is I was still a coward, even facing death. It was Victoria herself who finally pushed me to act. 3 months ago, she came to me with plans to expand the company into AI development. She was so excited, so proud. She showed me her business plan, her projections, her strategy. It was brilliant work. She's always been brilliant, but there was something missing, some core of integrity that should have been there. What if the technology gets misused? I asked her. What if it harms people? That's not our problem, she said. We're not responsible for how people use our products. And I realized I'd taught her that. I'd taught her that success justifies any cost, that business is amoral, that you do what you have to do to win. I'd taught her these things by example, by staying silent about what I'd done, by letting you take the blame. I made you into her cautionary tale, the weak man who stole because he wasn't strong enough to succeed legitimately. And she learned the lesson I'd intended. Be strong. Be ruthless. Never let sentiment get in the way of winning. I created a monster, Thomas. Not Victoria, she's still capable of being the person she should have been. But the version of her I shaped, molded, trained to follow in my footsteps, that version is a monster, and it's my fault. So this will is not generosity. It's penance. It's strategy. It's my last attempt to be the mother Victoria deserved, even if she'll hate me for it. The money I'm leaving you, I know you don't want it. I know you'll probably give most of it away. That's fine. That's expected. But I'm also leaving you Brennan Technologies, and there I'm asking something of you. Don't let the company die. Don't sell it off in pieces or shut it down. It employs 3,000 people. It provides healthcare, pensions, opportunities. Those people are innocent of my crimes and yours. They deserve better than to be casualties of our war with ourselves. But also don't let Victoria have it. Not yet. Not until she's earned it. Not until she understands what leadership actually means. Run it if you can. Hire someone to run it if you can't. Structure it however you need to. But please, Thomas, make it something worth inheriting. Make it a place where integrity matters, where people matter, where success is measured by more than profit margins. Make it what it should have been from the beginning. If Victoria ever becomes the person she should be, the person I should have raised her to be, then give it to her. But only then. That's all I ask. I've also included documentation of my crimes. Original bank statements, emails, memos, everything proving what I did. Give it to the authorities if you want. Clear your name officially. You've earned that right. Or keep it private and let the truth exist in the will. That's your choice. I don't know if there's an afterlife, Thomas. I don't know if I'll be judged for what I've done. But if there is, and if I am, I hope whoever's doing the judging takes into account that I loved our daughter. I loved her so much I was willing to destroy a good man to protect her. That love was selfish. That love was cowardice. That love caused irreparable harm. But it was love. I'm sorry. Those words are inadequate, I know. Sorry can't give you back 12 years. Sorry can't restore your reputation. Sorry can't rebuild your relationship with Victoria. Sorry is just a word. But it's all I have left to give you, along with money you don't want and a company you never asked for. Use them better than I did. Margaret. I read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. My hands weren't shaking. My eyes weren't wet. I felt strangely calm, like I'd finally reached the end of a very long journey and found nothing there but air. Margaret was dead. The truth was out. Victoria knew what I'd done, what her mother had done. And I was suddenly, absurdly, impossibly wealthy. None of it felt real. I stood up, picked up the envelope, and walked to the window. The sun had fully set now, and Toronto's lights were beginning to shine like stars scattered across the ground. Somewhere in this city was the girl I'd once pushed on swings, the daughter I'd gone to prison for, the stranger who'd walked out of this room an hour ago with her whole world shattered. I should have felt triumph, should have felt vindicated, should have felt something other than this vast, empty tiredness. But all I felt was tired. The next week passed in a blur of paperwork and lawyers and accountants. Mrs. Holbrook was efficient within 5 days. I had access to accounts containing more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Within 7 days, I had a majority stake in Brennan Technologies and a board meeting scheduled to introduce myself as the new owner. Victoria didn't contact me. I didn't contact her. We orbited each other like binary stars, too much history to collide, too much gravity to escape. On Thursday, I met with the executive team at Brennan Technologies. They were polite, professional, and clearly terrified. The disgraced ex-CFO had just become their boss. The man who'd supposedly embezzled from the company now owned it. Never mind that Margaret's will had cleared my name. People believed what they wanted to believe, and they wanted to believe the narrative they'd been told 12 years ago. I'm not here to run this company, I told them in the conference room that had once been Margaret's domain. I don't have the skills or the desire, but I am here to ensure it runs ethically. Mrs. Holbrook will be implementing oversight procedures, independent audits every quarter, ethics training for all executives, a whistleblower protection system that reports directly to the board, which I'll be chairing. David Chen, Margaret's former second-in-command, cleared his throat. And what about day-to-day operations? Who'll be CEO? You will, I said. Interim CEO, pending board approval. You've been doing the job in everything but name for the past 5 years. Make it official. Relief flickered across his face. And Victoria? What about her? She's been vocal about contesting the will. She's been trying to get board support to challenge your ownership. I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. Let her try. The will is solid, and Victoria needs to learn something her mother never taught her. What's that? That some battles aren't worth winning. After the meeting, I walked through the building. My building now, though I could barely process that fact. Employees whispered as I passed. Some looked curious. Some looked resentful. None looked particularly happy to see me. I found myself on the top floor, in what had been Margaret's office. It had been cleared out, no personal effects, no photos, no trace of her presence except the faint scent of her perfume that still clung to the curtains. The office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I stood where Margaret must have stood thousands of times, looking out at her kingdom. Had she ever regretted what she'd done? Or had she convinced herself it was justified, necessary, the cost of success? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Can we talk? V. I stared at it for a long time. 2 words and an initial. My daughter, reaching out after 12 years of silence. Asking for something she'd never had to ask for before: my time, my attention, my willingness to hear her. I could ignore it. Could let her stew in her own confusion and anger. Could make her feel a fraction of what I'd felt, sitting in that prison cell knowing my daughter thought I was a criminal. But revenge had never been my style. And besides, I was tired of carrying anger. Tired of carrying anything. I typed back. Saturday, 10 a.m., Van Hoot, on Queen Street. Her response came immediately. I'll be there. Saturday arrived, cold and bright. One of those autumn days where the sun shines but provides no warmth. I arrived at the cafe early, ordered a black coffee, and took a seat by the window. The place was busy with weekend crowds, students with laptops, couples sharing pastries, families trying to contain energetic children. Victoria arrived exactly at 10, punctual as always. She looked different, smaller somehow, less polished. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a sweater instead of her usual power suits. She spotted me, hesitated, then walked over with the careful steps of someone navigating a minefield. Hi, she said. Hi, can I sit? I gestured to the chair across from me. She sat, ordered a latte from the passing server, then folded her hands on the table in a gesture that reminded me painfully of myself. For a long moment we just looked at each other. I tried to find traces of the little girl I'd known in this woman's face. She was there, hidden under layers of time and experience and hurt. But she was there. I don't know where to start, Victoria said finally. The beginning usually works. She smiled slightly at that, a ghost of the easy humor we'd once shared. Which beginning? There seem to be several versions, and I don't know which one is true anymore. The true one, I said. That's always the best place to start. She took a breath. I remember you as the best dad in the world. You came to all my soccer games. You helped me build that volcano for the science fair. You taught me to ride a bike and told me it was okay to be scared, but I should try anyway. You made me feel like I could do anything. You could. You did. Then suddenly you were a criminal. Mom said you'd been stealing from the company for years. She said you'd betrayed us, betrayed everyone. She showed me the bank statements, the transfers, the evidence. She said you'd confessed. I didn't want to believe it, but there it was, proof. Your confession. Your guilty plea. Prison. I remember. I was so angry, so confused. How could you throw away everything for money? We had money. We had success. What more did you need, I thought. She stopped, swallowed hard. I thought you'd loved money more than you loved us. The server brought her latte. She wrapped her hands around it, but didn't drink. Then Mom died, she continued, and that will, that letter. And suddenly everything I thought I knew was a lie. You didn't steal anything. You sacrificed everything for me, to protect my career, my future, and I've spent 12 years hating you for it. You didn't know, I said quietly. Your mother made sure you didn't know. But I should have. I should have questioned it, should have wondered, should have... Her voice cracked. You were my father. I should have believed in you. You were 28. Your mother was your hero, your boss, your mentor. She told you I was guilty, showed you proof. What else could you have believed? The truth. She looked up at me, eyes bright with tears. I should have believed the truth. The truth was hidden. Your mother made sure of that. I hate her for it. The words came out fierce, angry. I hate that she lied to me. I hate that she let you suffer. I hate that she built her empire on your sacrifice and never told me. I hate that she's dead so I can't scream at her. She was dying when she wrote that will, I said. She had months to reconsider, to change it, to keep her secrets. She chose to tell the truth. That took courage. Too little, too late. Perhaps. But it's more than many people manage. Victoria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so young it hurt to watch. I've been trying to contest the will. Did you know that? David mentioned it. I hired 3 different lawyers. They all told me the same thing, it's airtight. Mom made sure of that. So I can't even fight it, can't even pretend I have a leg to stand on. I'm just done. The CEO job I worked 12 years for, gone. The inheritance I expected, gone. The mother I thought I knew, never existed. The father I hated for years, innocent, my whole life, built on lies. She laughed, but it came out bitter. $25. That's what I'm worth. $1 for each year I worked at a company my mother built on fraud and my father's sacrifice. It's almost poetic. She wanted you to start over, I said, to learn what it means to earn something rather than inherit it. She wanted to punish me. Maybe. Or maybe she wanted to save you. Victoria looked at me then. Really looked, her expression raw and searching. What do you want, Dad? You have the money, the company, everything. You could destroy me completely. You could make sure I never work in tech again. You could tell everyone what Mom did, what I didn't know. You could... I don't want revenge, Victoria. Then what? What do you want? It was a good question. What did I want? For 12 years I'd wanted nothing, had trained myself to want nothing, had learned to live small, need little, expect less. And now I had everything, and I still didn't know what I wanted. I want you to be okay, I said finally. I want you to learn what your mother never did, that integrity matters more than success, that who you are matters more than what you own, that some prices are too high, no matter what you're buying. How am I supposed to do that? I'm 40 years old. I don't know how to be anyone except who Mom made me. Then learn. Start over. Find out who Victoria Brennan is when she's not Margaret Brennan's daughter or Thomas Brennan's victim or Brennan Technologies CEO. Just Victoria. Just you. I don't know how. I didn't either, I said. 12 years ago, I was a convicted felon with no job, no money, no prospects. I had to figure out how to be human again from scratch. It wasn't easy. Some days it wasn't even possible, but I did it. How? By accepting that the old life was gone, that I couldn't get it back and shouldn't want to. By finding value in small things, Mrs. Chen's gratitude when I saved her $40 on her taxes. The Patel's invitation to their daughter's wedding. Marcus texting me a photo when he graduated from UBC. Small things, honest things, real things. Victoria was crying now, not trying to hide it. I don't know if I can do that. You can. You're stronger than you think. I'm really not. You came here today, I pointed out. That took strength. She smiled through her tears. Or desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing. We sat in silence for a while, watching people pass on the street outside. A young couple holding hands. An old man feeding pigeons despite the do not feed sign. A child chasing a balloon that had escaped her grip. What will you do with the company? Victoria asked eventually. Keep it running. Make it ethical. Try to turn it into something worth inheriting. And then what? Give it back to me? Maybe. If you earn it. If you become someone who could run it with integrity instead of just ambition. She nodded slowly. That's fair. Your mother left you $25, I said. But I'm offering you a job. Entry level. Administrative assistant in the ethics compliance department. Minimum wage. No special treatment. No fast track to management. Just work. Victoria's eyes widened. You're offering me a job? If you want it. If you're willing to start at the bottom and earn your way up. If you can handle taking orders from people who used to report to you. If you can learn to value the work more than the title. That's humiliating. Yes. Everyone will know. Everyone will laugh. Probably. Why would you do that to me? I'm not doing it to you. I'm offering you a chance to do it for yourself. Your mother's will took away the life you thought you'd have. This is an opportunity to build a better one. But only if you want it. I won't force you. I won't pressure you. The offer stands, open-ended. Take it or don't. She looked at her latte, at the foam swirling in patterns on the surface. I need to think about it. Take all the time you need. She stood up, gathered her coat and purse, then paused. Dad? Yes? I'm sorry for not believing in you, for the years we lost, for everything. I stood too, faced her across the small cafe table. I'm sorry too, for the burden you've carried, for the lies you were told, for not being there to help you become who you should have been. Can we? She hesitated. Can we try again? Not pick up where we left off, that's impossible. But start fresh? Learn who we are now? I thought about that. About whether forgiveness was possible, whether trust could be rebuilt, whether 12 years of silence could be bridged by intention and effort. We can try, I said. She smiled a real smile this time, small but genuine. That's enough. Trying is enough. She left then, disappearing into the Saturday crowd. I sat back down, finished my coffee, and watched the city move around me. Toronto, the place I'd fled from, afraid to face what I'd lost. The place I'd returned to and found that loss transformed into something strange and unexpected. I thought about Margaret's letter, folded in my wallet, about her confession and her penance, and her hope that I'd use her money better than she had, about the company she'd built on fraud and sacrifice, now mine to reshape or destroy. I thought about Victoria, walking through the streets of Toronto, trying to figure out who she was when everything she'd believed turned out to be false. About the job offer I'd made, the opportunity to become someone new. And I thought about myself. Thomas Brennan, age 63, former CFO, convicted felon, tax preparer for small businesses, and now absurdly, impossibly owner of a $185 million empire. What would I do with it? The answer came slowly, like dawn breaking. I would do what Margaret had asked. Keep the company running, make it ethical, turn it into something worth inheriting. But I would also do more than that. I would use the money to create second chances, scholarships for people with criminal records, job training for those re-entering society after prison, rehabilitation programs. legal aid for those who couldn't afford defense attorneys. All the things I'd wished existed 12 years ago when I'd been released from prison with nothing but a record and a reputation. I would turn Brennan Technologies into a proving ground for Victoria. Not a gift, but an opportunity. A place where she could learn to lead with integrity, if she chose to. A place where she could earn what had been taken from her, if she was willing to work for it. And I would keep my apartment in Vancouver, my simple life, my small accounting practice. Because those things were real in a way wealth never could be. They were earned, chosen, lived. They were mine in a way inherited money never would be. The check I'd write Victoria for her first paycheck would be worth more than any inheritance. It would be the first dollar she'd ever truly earned, free from her mother's shadow and her father's sacrifice. And maybe, eventually, she'd understand that. Or maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she'd reject the job, reject the opportunity, reject the chance to start over. That would hurt, but it would be her choice. Her life to live, her mistakes to make, her path to walk. I couldn't save her from herself any more than Margaret could save me from my choices, or I could save Margaret from hers. We all have to walk our own roads, make our own decisions, live with our own consequences. But I could offer her a map, a starting point, a first step. The rest would be up to her. I stood up, left money on the table for the coffee and a generous tip, and walked out into the autumn sunshine. The air was cold but clean, sharp against my face. Toronto smelled like car exhaust and roasting chestnuts and possibility. I had a flight back to Vancouver that evening. Mrs. Chen needed her taxes finished. The Patels wanted advice on incorporating their business. Marcus was thinking about buying a car and wanted help understanding the loan terms. Small things, honest things, real things. But first, I had one more stop to make. Mount Pleasant Cemetery was quiet on Saturday afternoon. Just the wind and the distant traffic and the soft sound of my footsteps on the path. I found Margaret's grave, easily fresh dirt, fresh flowers, a simple granite headstone with her name and dates, and the inscription, "She built empires but forgot to build herself." I stood there for a long time, hands in my pockets, looking at that stone. So many things I could have said. So many accusations, regrets, what-ifs. But they all seemed small and pointless now, spoken to someone who could no longer hear them. "I'll take care of the company," I said finally, my voice quiet in the empty cemetery. "And I'll take care of Victoria, if she'll let me. That's all I can promise." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the smell of autumn leaves and distant rain. I waited, as if Margaret might answer. As if the universe might give me some sign that I was doing the right thing. But there was only silence. And maybe that was answer enough. I turned and walked back toward the cemetery gates, toward the cab that would take me to the airport, toward the simple apartment in Vancouver where my life waited, small and honest and real. Behind me, Margaret's grave stood silent in the autumn sun, holding secrets that no longer mattered, truths that had finally been told, and a legacy that I would spend the rest of my life trying to redeem. Not for her, not even for Victoria, but for myself. Because at the end of everything, after the betrayal and the sacrifice, after the prison and the silence, after the money and the revelation, what mattered wasn't what you owned, or what you'd lost, or who had wronged you. What mattered was who you chose to be when all the lies fell away and you stood alone with nothing but your own conscience and the choice of what to do next. I chose integrity. I chose second chances. I chose to believe that people could change, that Victoria could become someone Margaret never was, that I could use wealth to create more than Margaret ever had. Maybe I was naive. Maybe I was foolish. Maybe 12 years of living small had made me soft, unable to understand the cutthroat world I was stepping back into. But I'd spent 12 years learning to be human again, learning to find value in simplicity, meaning in honesty, peace in letting go of anger. I wasn't going to forget those lessons now. The taxi driver asked where I was going. I gave him the address of the airport, then settled back in the seat and watched Toronto disappear behind me, the glass towers, the traffic, the busy streets where people hurried past each other without looking up. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "I've been thinking about that job offer. Can I have the weekend to decide?" I typed back, "Take as long as you need. The offer doesn't expire." 3 dots appeared, showing she was typing. They disappeared. Appeared again, disappeared. Finally, a message came through. Thank you for everything, for the sacrifice, for the chance, for being willing to try. I don't deserve any of it. None of us deserve anything, I replied. We just get what we get and try to do something worthwhile with it. The dots appeared one more time then. I'll call you Monday. He'll answer. I put my phone away and watched the suburbs give way to farmland, then the sprawl around the airport. In a few hours, I'd be back in Vancouver, back in my small apartment with the rain on the windows and the radiator creaking. Back to Mrs. Chen's taxes and the Patel's business questions and Marcus's car loan concerns. Back to my real life. But now that life came with an addition, a $185 million responsibility, a company to reshape, and a daughter to help rebuild. It wasn't the ending I'd expected when Patricia Holbrook called me about Margaret's death. It wasn't the ending I'd have chosen, if anyone had asked. But it was mine. My story. My choice. And maybe that was enough. The plane took off into a sky turning pink and gold with sunset, carrying me west toward home and forward toward whatever came next. Below, Toronto shrank to toy size, then to nothing, just another city among many, holding its secrets and its stories and the lives of millions of people trying to figure out who they were and what they wanted and whether redemption was possible after everything fell apart. I hoped it was. For Victoria's sake, for mine, for all of us carrying the weight of our mistakes and our regrets and our choices. Because if there was one thing I'd learned in 12 years of exile and sacrifice and starting over, it was this. The story isn't finished until you stop trying, until you give up, until you let the mistakes and the betrayals and the losses define you instead of refine you. Margaret's story was finished, but mine was still being written, and Victoria's, and everyone's who still had breath and choice and the courage to try one more time. That was the real inheritance Margaret had left, not the money or the company, but the reminder that it's never too late to tell the truth, never too late to make amends, never too late to become who you should have been all along. Even if it takes dying to find the courage, even if it takes losing everything to understand what matters, even if it takes 12 years and a $185 million confession to finally make things right. The plane climbed higher, chasing the sun toward the mountains and the ocean and the small apartment where my simple, honest life waited for me to return and figure out how to reconcile who I'd been with, who I'd become with, who I'd now have to be. It wouldn't be easy. But then again, the worthwhile things never are.